help women, save lives, and peacefully end abortion where you live.
I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired.
You were serious about that?
Be inspired to change hearts and minds by joining over 1 million volunteers taking part in the global movement happening in your neighborhood.
She says, pray that I can get through this abortion. And I said, oh, no. So she went ahead and went into the abortion clinic. And she just came out. She told us, I'm not going to get the abortion. We just had a baby saved. We had a baby saved in Memphis today. Praise the Lord.
This is the 40 Days for Life podcast with your host, Sean Carney.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the 40 Days for Life podcast. I am Sean Carney, the president of 40 Days for Life and your host for this podcast, which is dedicated to helping you end abortion. And the largest 40 Days for Life campaign ever starts this September. And that is good news because it is the largest campaign ever, despite us losing campaigns for the best reason, which is their local abortion facility closed. And if some of y'all remember a year ago, which was the first campaign in a post-Roe America, we added U.S. cities, we added cities and had the largest ever, to my surprise, to I think most of our team's surprise. And we have done that again in year 2 of post-Roe America. So thank you to all the wonderful men and women who stepped up and applied and got trained over this summer to be a local 40 Days for Life leader. They are the lifeblood of this movement, which is in 1,600 cities around the world now. Praise be to God. And I want to ask you, the podcast listener and viewer, to pray for them. Pray for our leaders, especially our new leaders, because it's there's a lot going on in our country. There's a lot going on in the world, and abortion is front and center, and they are rushing out to the front lines. So if you are not a leader, you can join 40 Days for Life by going to 40daysforlife.com, finding your location, and signing up to pray. Signing up to pray. That's the most powerful thing that you can do. And somebody who is signed up to pray and has been for a very, very long time is my co-host today, and that is Mr. Steve Carlin. Steve, how are you?
Hey, Sean, I'm doing great. It's been a long summer, but yeah, it's time to hit the streets again and go out and pray. And as a former president might say about the biggest 40 Days for Life campaign ever, people tell me they've never seen anything like it.
Nobody's ever seen anything like it before. They're coming out of the woodwork. They're coming out of the woodwork. I think we've talked a lot about Trump recently. I know. I still want to reiterate something that the thing I miss most about Trump that's superficial, I guess. There's a lot of things I think people miss. But I miss Little Rocket Man.
Rocket Man should have been handled a long time ago.
We don't talk about him. We don't hear from him anymore. But the Little Rocket Man month.
Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself.
It basically lasted a month with the red button. And if you look at Guam, like,
let's see what he does with Guam.
Nobody knew what Guam was, where Guam was, unless you served in the military. But nobody knew what it was. And he's like, if he winks at Guam, I will blast him off the face of the planet. And you're like, the kids are like, I don't know what Guam is, but I'm assuming it's an ally. I was like, yes, Guam is our ally. So what do you miss most about Trump that's superficial, Steve? Is it Little Rocket Man?
That's definitely number one. But since you already took that, the fact that he was trying to acquire Greenland and make it part of the United States, I was a big fan of that and quite saddened when the term ended and we no longer had the chance to make Greenland great again.
I thought that was funny. I had no interest in Greenland, still don't. I don't care about Greenland. I don't think anybody else does either. I forget the logic of that. It was some kind of
I don't know either.
thing.
I liked it because it sounds like something you're like hanging out with your buddies when you're like 11 years old. Be like, you know what we should do? We should go get Greenland. I was like, yeah,
we should take Greenland. Yeah,
I'm in.
We should take Greenland.
I'll trade you a 1989 Troy Aikman rookie card and cash considerations for Greenland.
for Greenland. I bet you, and write in and tell us, did you know that Trump was trying to acquire Greenland? Email us at 40 days at podcast at 40daysforlife.com, because I forgot about that totally. And I think most people missed that, but that was that was a thing. I think Little Rocket Man has to be number one because it worked. Everybody made fun of him and said how ridiculous it was. And then Little Rocket Man's like watching TV going, he's crazy. And I'm crazy. I'm a dictator, but he's crazier than I am. And we never heard from him. But Trump did an interview like a month after all of that. And this is the only time I've seen him do this, where he's like reflective, and he kind of insinuates that he's going back on something he did that was weird, but he actually doesn't. And he was in an interview, and they asked him about, all the Little Rocket Man stuff and the rhetoric. And it's just funny to hear the reporters like say that, like this dignified, voice. Oh, the Little Rocket Man, wasn't that, a little below the presidency? And Trump was like, I felt silly. I felt like silly the way that I said it. I had to talk about the button, and our button is bigger. And I thought it was a little silly, but I had no choice. I had absolutely no choice. and I loved how I was like, oh, he kind of thought that was dumb, but he had no choice. So it was the right decision, and it worked.
You do what you got to do.
You do what you got to do. That was fun. We didn't plan to talk about Trump, but that was a lot of fun. Okay, today we are going to do a legal roundup. Our mission is having its best year ever this year with everything going on. But our mission is being endangered, as you, the podcast listener, have heard about or watched in the videos. The larger we get. And so to protect our mission, we launched the Institute of Law and Justice, have a number of great attorneys, some former DOJ attorneys. So we are joined by Matt Britton to do a legal roundup. Matt, how are you?
I'm well. And I know I wasn't allowed to jump in before I was introduced, but I was able to listen to your podcast introductions. First of all, Canadian Bacon came to mind, the movie where I think Alan Alda's president, and John, one of the big, what's the guy named from Uncle Buck, the actor?
Oh, John Candy.
John Candy is there, and they have to make up a war because the economy, so they're going to invade Canada. So they just film it. It's like the people who don't believe we've been to the moon, they think it's just filmed. Anyway, and so that's sort of like the thing. And you didn't ask me, but I bring that up because of the certainty that Steve has not seen that movie. Because
I have not seen Canadian Bacon, and I love John Candy.
Oh, it's funny. They pretend to invade Canada and film it. You got to see it.
It's like the opposite of Red Dawn, where the Russians actually invade us. So what do you miss about Trump that's superficial?
Having a president of a nation that puts that nation first, as they swore to do.
I think that's too substantive of an answer.
No, but he was always talking about America first, and that's what he was doing. We travel around the world, all of us on this call, and this, Sean. They've said we're worried because we knew that everybody thought Trump was nuts and nobody was going to do anything, and he's running around just claiming credit like all this bad stuff wouldn't have happened. And I think to a lot of extent that's true. And, the world is, I know I'm being serious about it, but I guess the funny stuff about Little Rocket Man is the same as he makes fun of everybody, whatever her name is, in Germany and all that. And the Poland and Russia situation. But he's just saying none of this would have, and it didn't. Nobody knows whether it would have happened. But I think they too thought he was crazy. So I got a little weary of it. But you see now, I saw a bumper sticker that said, "I'll take a mean tweet and $1.67 a gallon gas about right now." So I guess that's what I miss: a good economy, certainty, sort of a national, a love of country that is gone. And everybody said Trump's divisive, and he was, but Roe v. Wade is divisive. And as you pointed out, when we overturned Roe v. Wade, that's when the country got really divided. The half the country that's pro-life and half that's not. And Donald Trump didn't do that. He wasn't on the Supreme Court in 1973. He didn't appoint any of those justices. He was pro-abortion back then. In fact, we've done that to ourselves, and he points that out. So I guess that's what I missed. Just whether you agree with it or not, or even think it's funny or not, the brutal honesty.
And
I think my favorite part about that is, imagine if you could build a time machine. You got your rockets and now you got your time machines. Go back in time to 2015, 2016, and imagine that someday someone would say the thing that I missed most about the Trump presidency was the certainty.
It's so true, though. And I think that in the consistency, people didn't like that. One of Trump's failures that surprised me going in was because his companies were not like this, just the onslaught and revolving door of his staff. He did not have that with his companies, and it just seemed like everybody was going in there and resigning in 6 months. But he was the constant, and that gave us the certainty, and it ended up working on.
Yeah, I think you're right. See, perhaps consistency is a better word. You knew what you were going to get, and you knew where he stood, and there was a certain amount of that, frankly, with George W. Bush.
Mm-hmm.
That people, after he sort of reformed his life, people knew that they could rely on his word, and that ultimately, if he got advice that was against his central principles, he was going to reject that advice. He was the president of the United States. And I think pretty much everybody's pretty sure that the president of the United States is not the one, like he's taking advice and being pulled around, the tail's wagging the dog at this point, whether it's because of mental capacity, no one knows that, age, no one knows that, or just a desire to do what he's being told people want to hear, and that's not leadership. That's not leadership. Whether you look at Edmund Burke or whatever, you are elected to use your judgment and get the best people. That's what you're elected to do. So I just missed that. And that's why I was calling it certainty that, right, wrong, or indifferent, at least you have a person who's making decisions based on a known philosophy.
Well, the certainty that we have is unfortunate. And that is that we continue to get persecuted by the DOJ, by our own government, by local laws, state laws. So let's do a little bit of a roundup, Matt, because maybe we'll start with good news. Recently, this abortion pill. So abortion pills are now 51% of all abortions. Chemical abortions are
54. Yeah.
54. You're still going to have the brick and mortar places where they're distributed. I know we've talked a lot about CVS and Walgreens, but that hasn't taken off yet. That hasn't been approved yet or finalized. And mail order abortions, I think, are highly overrated. I think that they will pick up in the years to come, but right now, that there's a lot of laws against those, and we're getting more by the week. But explain this Texas decision where we won, and we won regarding chemical abortions, which is important because that's the future.
Yeah, it was a great win. It was a great win for medicine abortions as opposed to procedural abortions. And it was a Texas win. And I don't want to go overboard and take credit for it or anything, but we didn't file the lawsuit. It was the Alliance of Hippocratic Medicine. And we just got reached out to by our partners, law firm partners over the years that knew that I had been pushing this rulemaking thing. I keep saying, but we're lawyers. Like I understand that I'm on the street too. So are you guys, you and Steve, thousands of hours more than me, but hundreds of places. And we're on the street too, praying and fasting to end abortion. But when you're in court, you use laws, right? And just like they use procedure. And one of the things was back in 2000, the FDA just pushed through this approval. And I've been involved in tons of lawsuits. I was telling you, Sean, you were probably started to fall asleep, but it wasn't about pills. It wasn't about abortion. It wasn't about the FDA. It was about the FCC, the Federal Communication Commission, on a monopole case. And they didn't follow the rulemaking. The reason I connected it in my mind was when they didn't follow the rulemaking, they approved monopoles. The RF emissions can harm who? Pregnant women. So I connected it in my mind. I thought, and now look, they've gone back to 2000 and they said they just pushed this through. Then in 2016, 2021, the FDA pushed through more regulations, relaxing it. So in 2000, they allowed the abortion pill. Then they allowed it through the mail. Then they allowed it without a doctor doing it. Now they allow it at pharmacies. So Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine, God bless them, wrapped themselves in glory, filed a lawsuit along with others, and it got appealed. The Supreme Court's involved, but the bottom line is that the court has given an injunction stopping them from using the modifications that ease the restrictions and allowing them to use the 2000. So abortion pills are legal, RE486, is legal, but it's under review by the United States Supreme Court. And in the interim, they got to follow the old 2000 rules, not the relaxed rules. So that's where we won. And we filed a brief called an amicus brief, a friend of the court. We're not a party. It's not 40 Days for Life versus or against the FDA. It's the Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine. But we filed a brief with an outside law firm in our name saying, and here's our position. Like, this is why it's wrong. And so we got notice that was partially accepted. If y'all look at it, I know you're going to put out a little email maybe or a press release on it, Sean, but in there, if you get a chance to read it, Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine, we can probably put up a link to it. Read Judge Ho's, partial concurrence. He's the one that concurred in the case that went to the Supreme Court, the Dobbs case in the Fifth Circuit that overturned Roe v. Wade. And he said, I'm duty bound to hold that Roe overturns Dobbs. But here's the shameful conduct of all the attorney generals throughout the United States who haven't argued the following 20 arguments. And it's just one of the greatest pro-life pieces. And look, he was born in 1973 in Taiwan. So he was born in China in the year that Roe v. Wade. And he's so bright and so pro-life. And he has a great statement, including the FDA just got it wrong.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be a lawyer.
And they don't say that. Judge Ho does, but that's very rare where they are calling out their own government, who they also work for, and just say they got it wrong. Usually,
Scalia used to, God rest his soul.
Yes. But he's the only other one. I mean, it's usually said very prim and properly, and Judge Ho is awesome, and we signed on to that. That was a great victory. It's very much needed. Hopefully, it sets a precedent with chemical abortions. One of the cases that will jump up from Texas to New York. Shocker that we're getting persecution in New York, but we also won the first provision of the Westchester case, where in Westchester, New York, they're trying to deliberately ban 40 Days for Life. They've been successful. We've had to go away. They made it illegal with these ridiculous buffer zones. So explain the victory, Matt, and then what else has to happen.
Yeah, it wasn't a legal victory. It was a political victory as a result of the lawsuit. The press, and this is they called it the court of public opinion. Sometimes you can just go to the press or do a podcast like this. Someone will hear about it and say, we better not pass that. Sometimes they do. So there was a lot of bad press. But what happened is that it's not just us, but it's mainly us. 40 Days for Life National, the organization, as well as 40 Days for Life White Plains, the local vigil that we have so many thousands of, run by one of our great, iconic leaders in America, runs 2 campaigns, added our name to a lawsuit. Well, didn't add it, but joined in with 2 other individual people who pray there. So there's a couple of individuals, 40 Days for Life and 40 Days for Life White Plains, the volunteer group. And we all sued Westchester County because they did this ridiculously overbroad, unconstitutional, unlawful ordinance, which basically targeted us and said, oh, anybody can go in this area 100 feet from the abortion facility, except for pro-lifers. And if you're a pro-lifer, you can't talk about pro-life. You can't hand out literature. You can't approach a woman, abortion minded. You can't approach any woman. If there's someone like cleaning the light sockets in the municipal, you can't approach her if you're a pro-lifer. If you're just a guy looking for directions, you can. If you want to sell her a ticket to the theater, you can. But if you're a pro-lifer, you can't. So anyway, in addition to that, Sean, it had the buffer zone, the last buffer zones held by the Supreme Court in the United States, which says that 8 feet float around a woman, sort of like a big donut floats around a woman, and you can't approach her within 8 feet if she's within a certain distance of an abortion facility. So they had that. And that's called the Hill buffer zone, Colorado v. Hill, year 2000. So it's 20 some years old. And we filed this lawsuit. And as a result, just out of nowhere, the Board of Supervisors, which they call the Board of Legislatures, the people who are elected to run Westchester County, New York, which is right outside of New York City, very wealthy.
Beautiful. It's like extreme wealth. We've joked about it on the podcast. It's like The Great Gatsby. If you've read the book or seen one of the movies, I mean, it's beautiful to fly into White Plains because you're looking over these estates and you're like, okay, no, that guy does have 4 tennis courts. Like you can see these beautiful properties. So this is like a bunch of
Hamptons without the ocean.
Absolutely. It's a bunch of rich people who just want to get rid of 40 Days for Life. And, Matt Damon has had a house up there. Trump had a house. George Soros. Like this is extreme wealth and celebrity. And then you've got this great 40 Days for Life campaign. So I think that's important for the context because, most abortion facilities are in very rough areas of rough cities. We don't get banned from those. They're all blue. They're all Democrats. They don't agree with us, but we don't get banned from like inner city abortion facilities. We get banned from,
Although this is a tough, as you've been there as a vice many times, but it's on the highway, on a bend on the highway. And in terms of that, it's traffic shooting by, and we can only get up to the driveway. But you can counsel, you can talk to the women, or you could coming in. They of course said you can't stand within 100 feet, you can't approach a car, you can't approach a woman, can't talk to them, you can't hand out. So all that's still pending. We're all suing them for that. But in the meantime, this 8-foot bubble zone, they repealed just out of nowhere. The Board of Supervisors got a proposed amendment, and they amended the ordinance to repeal it. And the reason was because they knew they'd lose in the Supreme Court of the United States, and they wanted to preserve the buffer zone and the rest. They didn't want to screw it up for the rest of New York or whoever wants to use that buffer zone, or who currently has one, which is several jurisdictions in the United States, has this 8-foot buffer zone. And that's the 8 foot around a woman within a certain distance. And so they backed off. They were like, well, we don't want to be the ones known to screw up Hill v. Colorado, like Alabama was the ones known to screw up Roe v. Wade, right? From their perspective, that's a screw up. From our perspective, it's patriotic, loving women, loving the unborn, and wrapping yourself in God's glory. But that's not their perspective right now. And so we won on that through political pressure. It's not like we got to court and the judge ruled our way or the Supreme Court overruled it. We wish that happened. And in a way, we wish they hadn't repealed it. A smart thing to do of them. But we're still fighting, and we're still fighting in the federal district court. We're still fighting in the Second Circuit, which is the appellate court, and we're trying to fight in the United States Supreme Court on Hill, but probably will lose there because they repealed the ordinance. So it's what they call moot, like who cares now? So that's the second big case that we are handling. 40 Days for Life is a plaintiff in, I should say, in the local chapter. And thanks, big shout out to all those people who were involved in that and have to give depositions and sworn testimony. Steve knows that. He's had to do that in Canada in a case when a woman sabotaged our vigils and filled up our vigil calendars so that we couldn't, people thought they didn't need to go and pray. Smart, illegal, malicious, but smart, and filled up, like, ordered everything in our store so it looked like you couldn't buy any signs to give to our great leaders and stuff. So
I'm curious, Matt, if I can ask, it seems backward to me that they would repeal the part of the ordinance that they felt was most likely to survive a court challenge, like that Hill bubble zone.
They felt like it was least likely to survive. I'm glad you clarified that. They knew it would be overturned.
The Hill part. Hasn't the Hill part, like, haven't we seen like places like Chicago and some other jurisdictions, don't they sort of use the Hill bubble zone as a template because the Supreme Court affirmed that one?
Yes, prior to Amy Coney Barrett.
Okay, so now they think the tables have turned, so that's why they're gonna try to bail.
And they're right. Dobbs made them believe that every abortion related provision is going to go down. And it seems they were confident in, that's called Price v. Chicago, the case you're saying. There's a Pittsburgh case as well. Nikki Bruni, our great leader in Pittsburgh, has a a bubble zone, as you know. And yeah, we lose those. We did lose those, and now we're not going to. So Westchester doesn't be the one to give bad precedent.
But they kept all the other provisions. Is that sort of like, hey, we'll probably lose on this, but we've got nothing to lose anyway, so let's give it a shot?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I can't tell you whether we'll probably lose on this. If they were getting good counsel, they would know that. But we do know from the legislative history that they have been given counsel even on a case that was there in New York, the Greep case that was overruled, and they were given counsel by the county or city that let's rely on this case even after it had been overturned. So we know there's some questionable background. That's in our brief. That's in their legislative history. It's recorded. That's not my opinion. And so I don't know that they are getting good counsel on this. And I don't necessarily mean legal counsel. I mean all around counsel, being told what to do. I don't know whether they think it's going to fail, but what they do know is it's on them. Like, who cares about the other provisions, 6 provisions we're attacking? If they go down, it's just a local ordinance. Happens all the time. Speed limits, traffic cameras, mud flaps, when you pick up the trash, all these local sound ordinances. It's just on us. It doesn't affect the rest of the country. So I think they don't want to be like many politicians. They don't want to look bad.
Yeah, and I think that was one of those where filing the lawsuit, we were halfway there, and we were blabbing on about, yeah, this is great. It's a gift. It'll go to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court's on our side now, and we can overturn the only case, which is Colorado v. Hill, and that was enough. I mean, they kind of ran for the hills, because you're right. It would have been, they would have, and rightly so, gotten blamed for getting rid of all buffer zones by this stupid law, just because they don't like the opinion of the people standing on the street. It's just such a loser. It's ridiculous, obviously, that we even have to talk about this, because it just seems common sense. But this whole newfound popularity of, I don't like your opinion, so I will ban you. I just have never seen it. You know, you mentioned how Trump is divisive, and he is in a lot of ways, but in most ways, he just revealed how divided we are, as did Barack Obama. I don't think Obama was divisive like, Trump or Obama. I think they revealed how divided we are, but we've never gotten to the point where we say, you can't talk.
They call that weaponization, and you make a great point in that, Mark Houck and Mark appeared, and I was just counsel before the weaponization subcommittee of the House Justice Committee, right? And they call it the weaponization committee, and it just goes to show so many people, and I don't after a while I get tired of the bluster, but so many people are like, oh, this person or that, their podcaster or Trump or whoever it is so blustery, and they're just always making fun of little Rocket Man and little Marco and Crooked Hillary and all that. I'm just tired of it. That's divisive. But then look at the guy who comes in, come on, whispering, talking, never yelling or screaming, never using, at least in public, cursing or anything like that. And then the policies, for the very first time, your lawyer is getting arrested, or your lawyers, or they're putting your opponents in jail, or they're setting court dates, on times when they know you, and there's no yelling or screaming. There's no blustering there. There's implementation of policies that are directly against the interest of American citizens and are destroying the fabric of America, right? And so, I'm not saying that anybody's the Antichrist, but what I am saying is the Bible said that I will come in peace, preaching the gospel. And so it's not always the yeller and the screamer. Sometimes it's not that guy you have to worry about. It's the one that comes in silence, sort of like the guy who's screaming and yelling at you, if you ever do that again, I'm going to kill you. It's the Navy SEAL that never tells you that you got to worry about, right? That's how come those guys are so effective. And so I agree that, but we filed this lawsuit. Bottom line, you said it best, Sean. Filed the lawsuit. They caved under pressure, and it was a political maneuver, so they wouldn't look like the bad guys, and the rest of the libs wouldn't say, "Stupid New York, why did you wreck Colorado v. Hill for us?"
This should be an encouragement to everybody, because I think especially prior to the Dobbs decision, we were so used to losing, to getting kicked in the teeth, and everyone's kind of like, why don't we find like the lawyers who can do what their lawyers are doing? And here, like, I don't know exactly what the future holds. I don't think anyone does when it comes to litigation until a decision is actually made final. But this is a case where they're in retreat and we're on offense and they're backpedaling. And that's a nice change of pace these last couple of years.
Great point, Steve. And when I was interviewing folks for our new Institute of Law and Justice, I asked them, how many jury trials have you tried? How many trials have you tried to verdict? How many cases have you tried? Like, they're called bench trials because the judge sits up on the bench in front of a judge. And whenever I got the answer, well, cases don't really go to verdict. Juries don't really, you can settle case. No, we have trial dogs. We have lawyers that said, like, I can't count, or dozens or hundreds. Those were the answers, because you're exactly right, Steve. In 40 Days for Life, when you are defending the unborn, every case has a litigant that's not named, the unborn, and they can't file a lawsuit. They can't testify, can't give a deposition. And then the pro-life movement. When a person comes in, like our leader in White Plains, they don't settle. They're not settling because they know the effect that will have on the pro-life movement. Mark Houck didn't settle. He was offered a plea agreement with no time. And he said no, because, he was looking at 11 years. Talk about guts.
Yeah, this wasn't a buffer zone. This was like 11 years in the federal penitentiary.
This wasn't a fine or even a day of contempt. This was 11 years away from his family, and his lawyer nudged him and said, I don't know, man. I don't know. And he's like, I'm not taking it. I'm not pleading to something that I didn't do. It would be unjust. It would be ungodly. That's where we are. And you make a great point, Steve, because those are called settlements or pleas. Well, we're not pleading with anybody but God, right? And we're not settling with it. You don't make a deal with the devil. We're not settling with the pro-abort community. Like, you don't shake hands with the devil. You don't. They aren't going to follow the agreement. Christ himself said, right? Lies come naturally to him, for he is the prince of lies. And that's who we're fighting. So you make a great point. And we have folks that are, within the bounds of ethics and holding the truth. If we find out we made a mistake, of course, we admit it. But we are going to file these lawsuits, and we are going to stick with them, and we're going to win, because we have the gospel of life behind us. And that's what the Lord promised us will prevail even against the gates of hell.
It's great because I know, as a local leader and have working with so many local leaders across the country, sometimes there's almost been sort of this sense of despair of, like, whether it's something that's legislation that's completely out of our hands at 40 Days for Life, or maybe it's say an incident happens on the sidewalk where someone's threatened, and the moment legal stuff gets involved, I think people are like, wow, they always win anyway, and they're not winning anymore. So that's why I think it's such a source of encouragement to everyone who's watching and listening to the podcast today.
Yeah.
You bring up a great point again. Volume. We can respond to more. Not just can we do better and respond to more. And look, we've had a lot of great outside legal help over the years that have done a lot of great job. But defending your own, nobody knows your business like the people in your business, right? Let's just say that you are a tire company, right? You don't have an inside litigation department. You hire a big law firm. They make $1,000 an hour. They know what they're doing. They can learn your business. They can know about tires and vulcanization and rubber and like 3-ply and 10-tie. They can learn that. They can learn it. But if you have a litigation department that has engineers and litigators, and we have doctors and lawyers in ours that are experts in the country, that leading experts in the country on pharmaceuticals. We have doctors that know about what is informed consent, right? We have litigators I have tried, one of the most common things we get is trespass. You trespassed. I probably tried 500 trespass cases. We have 2 other litigators that have probably tried another 500. We have thousands, everything it is, whether it's a noise ordinance, a lighting ordinance, any of it, we know. And we know what 40 Days for Life does, and we visit, and we've been on the street, and we're like, that's BS. That's not what happened. This isn't even on a corner. There's no corner anywhere near it. And so that's how come we're winning, because protecting and defending your own is different than hiring a hired gun, an outside law firm. And we are protecting our own. And that's the message we're giving. And you're right, Steve. And I'm glad you recognize it. You're that's what you do, run these campaigns, and you did your own for so long and did such a great job. We got your back is our kind of motto.
Yeah. And before I ask you about the abortion pills, some of these lawsuits and big pharma, Steve, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think most people, Roe is overturned, and most people, pro-lifers or just people who listen to the podcast, think that chemical abortions, the pills, the chemical abortions are legal everywhere, and that's all that people are having. There's no surgical abortions, and that you can get them through the mail no matter where you live. Do you think have you encountered that? We've actually never talked about this, but there's a lot of people that just think, oh yeah, it's all chemical abortions now after Roe. There's no surgical abortions, and you just get on Amazon and they'll send it to you.
Yeah, I mentioned previously that there was sort of this despair whenever anything got into the courts. Oh, Planned Parenthood's attorneys always seem to prevail, and so people kind of like lose hope. And I think there's a little bit of a similar factor going on right now with the abortion pills. It's kind of like we've talked about before, how we've had to remind people that winning the Dobbs case was a good thing. That's like there's challenges, but they can be overcome, and we need to take heart because the tide of history is turning right now. And I think there's a similar thing where it's like, okay, well, finally, I guess I was wrong. They did overturn Roe, but we know they're just going to get these pills anyway. And, the truth is somewhere in between, right? We can't just rest easily thinking that Roe's gone, so abortion is gone. They are working tirelessly to continue to kill unborn children using whatever means they can, which in many cases is these new and novel and reckless ways of dispensing abortion pills through retail pharmacies, the mail, bringing them across the border. But there's no reason to think that that's the final word. There's a whole lot that can be done. That's what we were sort of discussing on the front of that Texas case. We can continue to battle in the courts. But, even though the majority of abortions are now chemical abortions, the majority of those abortions are still taking place at places like Planned Parenthood. And nearly half of all abortions are still surgical abortions where we have vigils taking place. So I don't think anyone should feel like we got a brave new world. The abortion pills are a relatively new frontier in this battle, the way they're distributing them. But by no means are we caught as unprepared as say, Planned Parenthood was when the Dobbs decision came down. We've been talking about, Sean, how long have we been talking about Planned Parenthood looking to mail order abortions? At least 5 years before the Dobbs decision came out. So there's a lot that can be done, that is being done. And by no means should we be discouraged on this front.
Yeah, and we've also talked about on the podcast, since Roe was overturned, Planned Parenthood doesn't really want mail order abortions. They just can't say that publicly. They want people coming in and being regular customers, and so their model is the brick and mortar, and so that's kind of an interesting.
It was what a year ago that they announced they were going to have their abortion van in the state of Illinois. It was going to be out by the end of the year. Not here yet.
Never happened. Then we realized, I think that's a brochure. It's not an actual van. And they just never did it.
Colorado too, I think.
Colorado, same thing. New Mexico. Okay, so Matt, it does seem, I think there is cynicism where, good night, abortion pills. I mean, they can't. They can just sit in a Planned Parenthood, or they can sit in an Amazon factory and mail all these out. What are the legal challenges? Is it legal, first off, to do this in all states? Like, as a Texan, if I'm a doctor, can I mail an abortion pill to a girl in California or vice versa?
Nobody knows. It's happening, and there's all ways around it. States are now passing laws against allowing it in, so to make it clear. But the fact of the matter is that all of these mail order abortions were all brought long ago by this pilot program. And this is the issue, talking to one of our leaders at our symposium, that we're no longer a nation of laws, we're a nation of rules. And the sophisticated, or the person who's been elected, it knows this, that we're ruled by bureaucrats that don't answer to the public, because the politicians say, oh, we'll pass a law that creates the FDA. And then the FDA that makes all these rules, such as you can mail out abortions. And they did. And it was a pilot program, and 13 states were enrolled in that. And then they just, in COVID, of course, they took an emergency and made it permanent, and they opened it up wide. And then there was even an executive order or a pronouncement by the Biden administration that the USPS, the United States Postal Service, could mail pills from a pro-abort state into a state that banned abortion. So UPS, United Postal Service, and I believe FedEx and some others said, we're only going to send them in where it's legal in that state. I believe that either CVS or Walgreens said, we're only going to sell them where it's legal in that state. They listed 20 states where they wouldn't. Some of the states were wrong. Again, you could have a team of lawyers working around the clock and not be, because of all the injunctions that get filed. As you know, abortion's supposed to be completely banned in Wisconsin, for instance. It's supposed to be completely banned in various states, Wyoming. And some circuit court judge comes along and bans the ban. And now there's no law at all. And this is happening in states you just can't believe, West Virginia and Wisconsin, Minnesota, Wyoming, where you would think that there is a ban on abortion because that's what the law is. But no, some court says something. So nobody knows. But here's what's happening, Sean. We have 50 states and one jurisdiction, the District of Columbia. There are territories as well, such as Puerto Rico. That gets even more complicated. But people are calling in from, say, Alabama, where we know abortion is banned. And they are ordering pills from Hawaii or Illinois, Vermont. You can imagine New York, the nanny states that have abortion on demand and free abortion. Colorado, New Mexico, no law, no parental notification, no age limits. They paid for by the government. The whole other question. New Mexico, yeah, they were the last state. It went from being a crime overnight to no law. They have no law, like Canada, North Korea, and China. No law, no restrictions. And anyway, so can a 13-year-old who's pregnant order pills from Alabama, from New Mexico? No, it's illegal in Alabama. There's an injunctive case against the whatever it was. I don't know if an executive order, just a letter from the DOJ saying that Biden administration allows that. So U.S. Postal Service, which has like a cabinet position, go ahead and keep mailing it. I don't know if they're doing it or not. We're going to find out. That's part of the legislative process, it's part of the political process. And we're getting involved in that with the Institute of Law and Justice like we never could before, giving comments on proposed legislation and rules like we've never been allowed. We're doing that on the Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act right now. And so that's the concern, Sean. It goes one further. So again, as the illustration, you're in Alabama where it's completely banned. Can't have an abortion, chemical, otherwise, no matter what. Nothing, no exceptions. Let's just say that state existed. Can I call Illinois and get them mailed in? We're going to fight that. But here, probably not. But here's what's happening. There are websites saying, here's how to get a P.O. box in your name in the nearest pro-abort state, and then have automatic mail forwarding. So, I mean, it's really evil. And once you begin to live by rules, you're going to find loopholes to those rules. And who's going to prosecute some young woman who did this because she saw it on a website? Almost all the states ban the prosecution of the woman. So it's just a factory of deceit and politics and loopholes. And nobody can track and give you the answer. Is it legal for a pro-abort state to mail pills into a non-pro-abort state? It changes daily.
And a lot of the states are getting laws. Texas.
Well, now they are passing laws banning it. And then we know.
Banning it.
And that's, what's great about that? Then 40 Days for Life doesn't have to sue them. We just have to inform the Attorney General.
Right, exactly. Because the law's already...
The state can enforce it.
Right. Which is really good, and more states are. I hope this comes as good news to the listener, because I think people think of chemical abortions like, well, we'll never end that. That's over. But there are a number of things you can do.
They'll ban the sale of it in the state directly, like at the pharmacies. They'll ban mailing it in. Mississippi, Alabama, Florida. You'll see that those right-thinking, life-loving states will begin to do that. And like I said, what's great about then it's the state against, the people against. It's not 40 Days for Life against the federal government trying to get some injunction that's going to be appealed for 16 years.
Exactly. And that's, I just think too, market wise, and Steve, we've talked about this a lot. These are dangerous. And now they're making up 50% of all abortions. That's significant. We know your chances of going to the ER are high. It's just the elephant in the room of how dangerous
And
a
who
chemical
prescribed it?
abortion is. Right.
What informed consent did they give that even if it was 0.0002% of the women die from bleeding out alone in their bathroom from taking these pills? Who prescribed it? Is there any follow-up? Is a physician prescribing it in Hawaii practicing medicine in Mississippi? That's illegal. So, I mean, we got all this. Dr. Donato Barrio is a practicing medical doctor and one of the leading experts on this. He does it like 2, 3, 4 times a month, either in trial or acting as a witness. We're gonna get to the bottom of this. And you know that thing that comes in your aspirin or your Tylenol, the thing that comes in the box and you throw away and never read. It's got big words. Like that matters, right? When you're calling up over the phone and never anyone is laying hands on you, you're never talking to a medical professional, and there's no follow-up, and you are eating a pill that is designed to kill something, in this case, a human being, and there are known deaths and serious complications that result. Is that enough? Getting a little pamphlet that you can't read or understand? You know, I got these glasses about 10. I can't even read them with the glasses on. The writing is so small. Is that enough? Does that stand in the place of having a doctor visit where they lay hands on you and say, now these are the problems that could result from taking these pills?
It's going to be really
gone. Go ahead.
It's going to be really curious to me to see what this looks like long term, because this proliferation of the abortion pill is a relatively recent phenomenon in these last few years. It was just like a year or two ago that we saw the chemical abortions become a majority of the abortions. And, you know, we've heard a lot of the stories about like how many women have repeat abortions. I don't know a lot of the stories I haven't heard many stories of women who have had a chemical induced abortion, a pill induced abortion, and come back for a second or a third. I kind of wonder if the word is going to get out among women that like, you know, I had an abortion, I might do it again, I might not, but I wouldn't do it with the pill again.
Yeah, no, the word of mouth is very, very good for our side on chemical abortions. Abby's talked about that all the time, how she was a director selling abortions, and she found herself talking women out of a chemical abortion and into a surgical abortion because of her own personal experience. And she was.
And what was the reason? What's the like physical reason for that? Why did she think it would be better, safer, a better experience, not as bad of an? Why?
Because it was so painful for her personally, physically, and that she didn't want a woman going through that. And she knew, we market this like you're taking a couple of Tylenol and maybe you'll feel dizzy, and it's not that. And so when she had hers, I mean, she wouldn't have said this at the time, but the way she talks about it now, back then, here she is running an abortion clinic. She, in good conscience, for care of the woman she's talking to at work, couldn't recommend that she get a chemical abortion.
I mean, the reason I asked that, it's so outrageous, right? So if she had had a bad experience with her surgical abortion, but not the pills, she would have been recommending that. So that's what it is. You know, Tip O'Neill said all politics is personal. So
right.
What if they'd had a bad experience with both? Of course, that's horrible because that means that they had 2 abortions. Then they would say, don't get an abortion, or would they be lobbying in front of Congress to get a new and better abortion that you don't, you know what I mean? It just goes to show.
But also it's the way that they market it. When you go and you get a root canal, you know what that means. You tell your kid you have to get a root canal. They've heard other people talk about that enough that they know this will hurt. It's really going to suck. And so you know that, but they don't do that with chemical abortion. Chemical abortion is no big deal. That is how it's sold. And so I think that the 180 on that, and surgical abortions, a lot of the women talk about how those hurt, but that's surgery and you expect it and you're sort of mentally prepared for it. I think if you think you're going to go and pop the first pill in a chemical abortion and then kind of sit there and binge watch something on Amazon and just, you know, the baby will pass and it's no big deal. That's the difference, is that
you know, we were in Denver, Steve was there too, and we just had one of the great pro-life trial lawyers in America, takes a little bit different tack than us. He sues abortionists for failure of care and botching things. And Steve, remember that he said that they gave this pill to this woman who was 19 weeks pregnant, and then the baby was born alive and struggled and died on the table or whatever. And how's that for an experience? And they're trying to do that, right? That's one of the things that we won in the Texas case just now, which was stopping that lightning. So you can only have this pill up to a certain very few weeks, like 8 weeks or 9 weeks, right? And now they're trying to make it 20 weeks, and now they're trying to make it all through pregnancy. So you can take the abortion pill when you can like see your baby's foot pushing on your abdomen. Why don't we like poisoning?
No, it's like drinking gasoline. That's what they're pushing for. And these women are talking about the pain they've had now. It's 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks, 9 weeks.
That's delivery.
I know. You start doing this at 20 weeks, 25 weeks. I have no idea how you do that at home. I mean, maybe they'll make them go in. I think you would have to. They're going to go to the ER no matter what. But you can't. All of our wives have been pregnant a lot over the course of our life, thankfully. And, 25 weeks or 30 weeks, you're not going in the bathroom and saying, hey, I've got to, pop this thing out. It is going to be absolutely brutal. And I don't know, these politicians, these liberals that propose this, I always wonder, like, do you have children? Or have you ever been pregnant? You ever known a pregnant woman ever? Because this isn't, they're just thinking, get pills to as many people as possible through the entire term of the pregnancy. And it doesn't work that way. I mean,
how about the psychologic damage, right? Like they talk about in warfare, certain people could drop a bomb because you don't see your enemy, right? Mm-hmm. So you take these pills, and I think that the women are convinced it's just a blob of tissue. It's just a blast if it's not a baby. Well, maybe you can do the Jedi mind trick on the people who really don't want to think about it, right? Which would be the woman killing her child. But you can't do that at 7 months.
Right.
They know they killed their.
But even at 8 weeks, I mean, that is the sentence, Matt, that they say, oh, it's a baby. I didn't know it was going to be a baby because it's supposed to be a blob. They're bleeding out. No different than a really painful period. That's the line. And they see the little hands and feet, and it's a private encounter between only them and their dead child. Right. And what do you do with that? You bury it, and you never speak about it ever again. Right. At least when you go in for
flush it out of your mind, literally.
Yep.
But you can't do that with a 7-month-old baby. That's my point. You gotta lay hands, go to burial, wrap it. I don't know. It shows the bar. There's no difference between an abortion at 1 second and 9 months. We know that life is given to us at conception, but the barbarism of it is manifest when you can see it, right? That's why it's different from dropping a bomb and confronting your enemy right in the face. And am I going to use the knife, pull the trigger, use the bayonet, right? That's why they say, sure, a lot of people can drop a bomb. Not too many people can engage the enemy face to face. That's what it is. Literally.
It is.
Humanly, and face to face.
There's no recovery, even at 8 weeks. The horror stories are just absolutely brutal. Okay, let's pivot from that real quick as we wrap up. A lot of people get confused about the FACE Act, and that was the felony charge, because everybody's like, well, what was Mark charged with? He was charged with the FACE Act, and what is that? Because people are
Freedom of Access to Clinic Act, and that's one of the problems is we already have a law. So these localities come and say you can't block the street, and Steve's lived this too. So chime in, Steve. You can't block the driveway. You can't stop a car. You can't impede the path of a woman walking down or bicycling into her abortion or whatever they claim. And then they always say the narrative is that pro-lifers are blocking the path, intimidating women, using, yelling at them, screaming at them, using curse words, taking their picture, taking their videos, none of which they've ever proved, including in cases, hands off from 40 Days for Life, no dog in the fight, Jamaica, New York, not a Grace Baptist Church, Reap versus New York. You can read it, thousands of hours of high-mounted surveillance against a different group. We have been there before, but Grace Baptist Church, I believe it's called. And the judge said, we reviewed thousands of hours of film over 2 years, and we didn't see them doing anything wrong. You would have thought that you'd find something. So we're not doing it. They make up the narrative. You saw it, Sean. We dealt with that guy in Napa and our great leaders in Napa, and they said we were doing all this stuff, and we don't do it. And if it does happen, we tell them to stop it. And but it doesn't happen, and they are making stuff up because that's what they do. If you're going to kill babies, you don't mind lying. So the FACE Act says that you can't do all that stuff. It's already against the law. And by the way, every locality also has laws against spitting on people, hitting them, threatening them, blocking the roadway, jaywalking, interfering. They already so the FACE Act on a state level is amalgamating those laws and remaking it illegal again. The federal FACE Act, Freedom of Access to Clinics Act, says, look, people have free access without fear of intimidation, threat, harm to get to reproductive health, which actually we own, they don't. And that includes pro-life pregnancy centers. So for anybody listening out there, that includes your pro-life pregnancy center.
Yeah, most people don't know that. And it's in
and the
response to
DOJ has a memo on it.
This was to kill the rescues. The rescues.
It wasn't after us, and it was to kill the rescues, right? Which is getting arrested, blocking the doors, chaining yourself to the door, sometimes just sitting in a chair inside there, and you're actually trespassing. Sometimes they would take the chair and put it in front of the little gate so the woman couldn't come in and out, or they'd be afraid. They'd see 6 big guys like blocking the door, chaining. You're obviously not going to go there that day. And so it was against them, not us, not prayerful, fasting, and peaceful. But it doesn't matter. They got it passed and it exists. The dude, Bruce Love, that's the real name of the victim. The tape that got destroyed, but no one's disputing. Mark was within 10 feet of a pro-life pregnancy center across the street down the block from the abortion facility. And that dude ran across the street, or at least went across the street and down to Mark and interfered with Mark trying to get to women to go into the pro-life pregnancy center who had been in the abortion facility. And not only and that's a clear violation under the DOJ manual of FACE. Not only didn't they charge Bruce Love, they charged Mark. Why did they do that? What you would say, but why would they do that unless they were just corrupt is a word you use. You don't mean in the terms of like them getting money out of it, but just meaning that they've corrupted their reason for being. They've corrupted the law. They've twisted it on their head. I'll tell you why they did it. Because without that one, the second one would have been a misdemeanor or a felony, only 3 years. And by charging him twice, they got it up to 11 years. And then they knew they couldn't prove either one. So what did they do? We'll offer you just plead to the one and no jail time, right? That's why they did it. And remember, prosecutors are supposed to be able to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, not be able to prove it and strong arm you into pleading to something you didn't do. So not only did they not charge this dude and won't, they charged Mark twice. You know, they had an argument, a colorable argument that the second instance, which was near but not in front of an abortion facility, was a violation of FACE. It wasn't. They made it up, and it was wrong. It wasn't about abortion. It was about protecting his son. But it was on tape, and it was an argument. They had no argument on the first one. They used that to strong arm Mark into being threatened to have 11 years in the penitentiary instead of 3, or a misdemeanor. And that is what the FACE Act says. You can't interfere with a woman's rights to get reproductive health through doing the following. That's what it says. And they misapply it all the time, and they only apply it to us. I think, Sean, wasn't it once, or Steve, you know that. Didn't they just file one charge last year in Florida against an abortion facility, a pro-life facility?
Yeah, there was a lot of pressure that came on because, of course, different pro-life and faith-based groups were tracking the number of pregnancy centers and pro-life facilities and conservative legislators, all the different people who became under attack from everything from vandalism to firebombs. Hey, how come they haven't?
They burned one up in your state, didn't they?
Yeah, they firebombed Wisconsin Family Action here, a group that we've worked with on our 40 Days for Life campaign in the past. And pro-lifers started to notice, like, hey, how come you're charging this guy and raiding his house with guns drawn and a SWAT team? And he didn't do anything, and yet we got firebombed and you're not doing anything. So to me, it seemed like sort of a nominal, like, we've got to say we did something. So I guess we'll come after one pro-abort who went after one pro-life place. But you might remember, can't remember if it was Merrick Garland or who at the DOJ, but someone said, well, we haven't caught the people firebombing these pregnancy centers because they're doing it at night and it's dark.
I brought that out in the House Weaponization Committee about how ridiculous. But you know what? Don't take any of our words for it. Like, if you're watching this podcast to on the other side, like, oh, these guys are liars. Get on the website, DOJ website, under FACE Act. They proudly proclaim them all. See how many you can find that are related to and then go look in the news for the same thing. You know, the iconic one in Washington, D.C., they ripped that one up, wrote on their, all that stuff on their windows. They spray paint, if Roe v. Wade's not safe, you're not safe. I mean, those are all felonies. One case, just go look. And they don't even track them down, but somehow when they charge people who didn't do anything wrong, and that's what they need to do. And they need to kick their door down or whatever in the middle of the night, as opposed to just handling it like all other cases. It's an obvious, it's theater, it's politics, and it's weaponization. Sean, you can comment on this. I'll leave it here, but didn't they use RICO against Joe Scheidler back in the day in the 80s? And the racketeer, the mob act, you're like against the mafia. And suddenly he was the pro-life mafia, right? That's why we call him the godfather of the movement.
Right. It was which he has a great sense of humor about, God rest his soul. But yeah, the racketeering, that's what he was doing out on the street. And this is why this is such an important topic for the listener. And it's why we obviously have to have the Institute of Law and Justice, because they do want to come after 40 Days for Life, and they just haven't been able to. Obviously, FACE doesn't apply to what we do. And they know it. That's why we all haven't been rounded up these last 17 years and thrown in jail, because it is peaceful. It uses freedom of speech. So to stop it, they have to go after that. They have to go after free speech. And that's exactly what they're doing. They wanted to make an example of Mark Houck. He did not allow them. Instead, he gave us, thankfully, the recipe, which is to fight back, to win, and to embarrass them. It shows we have to use our free speech or we will lose our free speech. It's not just a great catchphrase. It's true. And we can do that now.
Who authorized raiding the guy's house with an FBI SWAT team and a state SWAT team and a local SWAT team when we offered to turn him in peaceably?
Oh, yeah.
And the guy that wrote the letter is a former assistant U.S. attorney. You could call him and trust him.
Before Mark's trial started, I asked some people at the FBI who I knew, who were good guys. I was like, why did y'all do this? I was giving them flack for it, but why would they do that? And they were like shocked that the raid happened, and they said, hey, but we will tell you, just be careful, because when the FBI does this, when we go in, when a local little, a shove is not a crime, when the local DA doesn't prosecute and then everything's thrown out, and the feds go in, typically that is because of something no one's talking about, because they're running heroin through their basement. It's a non-issue. They just got him on a technicality, and then it'll come out that Mark Houck was dealing drugs around the world from his basement. And so it was like, they were like, we don't really believe our agency is so corrupt that we're capable of that. It may come out.
There was no more to it.
I know he's not running heroin.
So let me give you an example. I used to do it all the time. We would have a low-level guy we find with possession, right? Bunch of pills, some crack, whatever. Then you go into the house, you find a computer network, you find hundreds of pounds, millions of dollars You call the feds and you're saying, hey, this went from a minor distribution to a national tracking, to trafficking. So it went from possession to selling to trafficking. You call the feds. Unfortunately, it happened with pedophiles. You would get someone who had this horrible allegation. You got one of these cases. Then you go in and you find out, as you know, of course, these pedophiles, this is the 50th. They have all this child pornography, and you turn it over to people that can handle a global or a nationwide search. So that in and of itself, I've done hundreds of times, asking the feds for help, turning for cases over to the feds. But that's not what happened here.
As one FBI agent told me, if they don't win that Philly case, that prosecutor is probably going to get fired or somebody's head will roll. I don't know if that happened, but Mark, we didn't win in Philly. It was a bloodbath, and it was an embarrassment for the DOJ and the FBI because of what we're saying now. Just nothing.
Less than an hour.
Yeah, deliberated less than an hour. Just
that'd be interesting to see whether she's still employed.
Yeah, I mean, given an impossible task. Okay, with that, 40 Days for Life is starting on Wednesday, September the 27th. That's that Wednesday. Steve can correct me. So we're just a couple of weeks away. Please go to the website, go to 40daysforlife.com, sign up, use your rights so we don't lose our rights. Remember, we do have your back. And so go out there peacefully, prayerfully. Of course, 99% of the time, this is very uneventful. Nothing happens. Free speech is respected in most of our country still. So go out there, and your main focus should be prayer, fasting, and reaching out to these women. And you can learn how to do that through our sidewalk outreach training. This is a great time to go through it. It's very quick. You have plenty of time, even with just 2 weeks. You have plenty of time to go through the sidewalk outreach training. It's $29. You get a t-shirt, you get a book, and you will be ready to be approached and approach women seeking abortions so that you can save more lives than ever this fall. So thank you, Matt. Thank you, Steve. Please rate, review, and share this podcast, and we will see you next time. God bless you.